Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our session, Cultivating Learning, Teaching African American History, Acts of Resistance. My name is Philippa Rappaport. I'm the lead for education and engagement at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology. And I'm joined today by Kendra Flanagan, who's the lead for teaching and learning at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. In this session, we'll explore an expanding set of free digital materials on African American history. It's called North Star, A Digital Journey. These materials are designed for grades 6 to 12, and they feature stories and through lines from the museum's permanent exhibitions. They have images, documents, videos, and checks for understanding so that students and their adults can investigate and think critically about history. Today, we'll focus specifically on individual and community resistance. You'll gain knowledge, content knowledge applicable to teaching about slavery in the U.S. context, as well as familiarity with the many free resources included in the online set. So Kendra is a longtime educator at the Smithsonian. She's a bit of a North Star herself for our education community, and certainly for me personally. And I'm so pleased that she's able to join our session today. So a few logistics as we're getting started. This is an interactive session and we'd love to hear from you. So I see some of you are already introducing yourselves. Fantastic. If you're having any trouble doing that, just know if you're joining us through YouTube, you have the section over on the far right of your screen, the chat. And if you're joining us through Facebook, it's at the bottom center of your screen. You're already introducing yourselves. Thank you. And it's so great to see you all here. You're joining us today through the Learning Lab, which is a free online platform where you can discover digital museum resources from across the Smithsonian and beyond, create interactive learning experiences with them, and then share your discoveries and creations with others. We'll be sharing resources today from the Smithsonian Learning Lab, and I've put all those links into a collection that the link for the collection is in the description of our program today, and I'll also be putting those in the chat. The Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology also offers a range of online learning to support you. So you can find all of that at our Help Center. And on that Help Center, you'll find all the essentials of how to use the lab, but also all of our archived resources. We have YouTube videos to help you, and then all of our professional learning. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, and then the archived version of it will also be available on this page. I should also say that you can access that help page from any page where you are in the Learning Lab. Just go to the bottom of the screen and click on Get Started. Last month, we started something that is really popular, which is that we started putting chapters into these Cultivating Learning sessions so that when you watch the archives, you'll be able to find the content more easily. So we've split today's session into 3 sections: Introduction to North Star, Historical Context, and also an activity, which will be exploring historical evidence. So Kendra will tell you more about all of that. And before I turn it over to her, I just want to start us out with this question. And while you're putting your answers in the chat, Kendra can take over. And the question is, think about something, a rule, a custom, a norm in your life or in society that you've considered unjust or wrong. How did you resist the norm? What are small and large ways that you pushed against it? And I'll turn it over to Kendra.
Hello, everyone. I am extremely grateful to be spending time with you all today. And Philippa, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's such a pleasure to have a chance to be with a group of educators and talk about the different resources and ways that we can bring this learning and teaching into our academic spaces. So once again, I'll just introduce myself with my title. I'm Kendra Flanagan, and I am the lead for the Teaching and Learning Unit of the Education Department at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I am really excited to share our digital resources that we have for learning more about African American history, and I'm really grateful to the Office of Educational Technology for having such a wonderful platform that we're able to be a part of in this community here at the Smithsonian. I'm really looking forward as well to sharing some content today with you all, exploring some primary sources, and I hope introducing some new friends to one of our latest educational offerings, which is our North Star, a digital journey of African American history. In our time together, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to engage each other as much as possible via your questions and comments in the chat. And I know between myself and Philippa, we're going to keep an eye on the chat and be able to connect with you all. So please do, Philippa, help me share out as you see comments, and I'll do the same. I know in one of the introductions, I saw somebody say that they were from St. Croix, and I was like, yes, beach and sand and sun. So I am watching the chat as it comes in. Um, so let's see. I also am seeing that we're having people coming. I see Philadelphia's here, Austin, Texas, New Jersey. So we're getting a great representation already. I'm seeing Philippa from across our time zones here, which is really nice, across regions, which I hope will make for a really great conversation because I know we're all in these academic spaces really looking to teach history and to talk about how we can help kids learn the skills, learn the content, and be able to use this for themselves to make critical decisions in their own life. Um, I really would like to also say welcome to all the people that are joining us. Even if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, welcome, and we're so glad to have you here. If you are continuing to join us and get settled in, I hope you'll have a chance to read the question that's on the screen and continue to take some time to respond to that opening question. If you haven't had a chance to reflect on it, you can take a moment and you can do so now. While you all are continuing to enter your responses to the question on on the screen, and I'll just read that question again. It says, think about something, a rule, a custom, a norm in your life or society that you considered unjust or wrong. How did you resist the norm? What are the small or large ways that you pushed against it? So just continue to take a moment and drop some ideas and some thoughts about that into the chat. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about our museum while you do that. Our museum is, again, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We are proud to be a part of the Smithsonian Institution family. We were founded by an act of Congress in 2003, and we are the first national museum to explore the African American story from the 1400s through to today. We used to be able, when I would do this introduction, we used to be able to say we were the baby of the museum, the newest museum on the block. We're not that, we're not the baby anymore, but we are so excited to be able to be a part of this family and to welcome our newer museums that are coming online with us as well and helping to share this large American narrative and story that we have in front of us. Our museum has 11 permanent galleries that cover history, that cover culture and art. We have 2 changing galleries, which bring in wonderful exhibitions that are thematically focused and just give us an opportunity to really delve deeply into certain topics. And we also have a robust schedule of programming and events, which really gives us an opportunity to take time and connect the past and present, to move into spaces where we're able to talk about how we ourselves in this contemporary moment can how we are history makers ourselves. Our education department, which I'm a part of, serves visitors of all ages with engaging resources and events. And we do this to share well known and lesser known stories of African American history. Within our education department, we have a unit that focuses on early childhood, serving visitors ages 0 to 8 and the adults in their lives. We have our teaching and learning unit, which serves educators and students in grades 3 through 12. And we have our audience engagement unit, which creates experiences for lifelong learners and family groups. And so Philip is going to be posting some, or maybe already has, posted some useful links in the chat if you want to learn more about the work of the NMAAHC, including many ways to engage with our educational resources. And we're going to share a few more links as we go forward through this session together. So I want to return to the opening question and just take a moment and call out some things, some comments that I'm seeing from the chat. Oh, I'm also noticing we have a few more people that have introduced themselves from where they are. I'm seeing Scranton, PA in there, Boston, Hawaii. Yes, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. So I'm noticing that Susan has pointed out that a norm that they recognize that members of academia need to look a certain way. And so she said that was said while she's wearing her Ghostbusters t-shirt, red sweater, jeans, and flip-flops with her hair dyed red and purple. I'm like, I'm liking that. I'm trying to work up the courage to, I want a hot pink braid. That's where I want to go with that. But she said she finds when she dresses as she do that her students find her more approachable and in a way more human. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that. Thanks. Yeah, so the norm that Diane put in is that girls and women should wear makeup to cover up their looks and be more appealing to others. And Diane says their pushback is really just getting more and more comfortable with herself, not wearing makeup. And now she can clap back when the comments come up. And I like that. I also I have to say that norm about wearing the makeup. I came in and I said, okay, I'm ready. Got to put my game face on and grab the lipstick. So thanks, Diane, for reminding us. Right? Doesn't always have to be that norm doesn't always have to drive what we're doing. And Alice says that it's not a societal norm, but that they boycott certain businesses with whom they don't agree on their stance on things. And that's another way to resist, to push back on something that you consider unjust or norm or someone's decision. Yeah, I appreciate this. Yeah, that you all are coming up with a lot of societal comments or norms or things that maybe, are just people say, "Oh, that's the way it is." And then there are choices and decisions that you're making or that you've made to kind of push back against what people consider just the way it is. Thank you all for sharing so much of your thoughts, and I hope as you continue to come into this space, if you see the question, please do feel free to continue to add your thoughts in, or maybe it's a question that you'd want to take and sit with your in your academic spaces as well. But let's go to our next slide. Thank you. So I want to take some time as we're going through today. I'm going to introduce you, like I said, to the North Star, this digital journey of African American history, which is one of our more recent resources that we have created here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And these resources have been created and designed to support the learning and teaching of the African American experience. So next slide, Philippa, please. So we were inspired to name this project the North Star. It takes the inspiration from the symbol of the North Star that many enslaved people that were making bids for freedom, self-emancipating, that this star would guide people north. So we wanted to take our inspiration from the North Star as that symbol of freedom, that symbol of the way to escape a life of oppression and enslavement, as well as taking our inspiration from the name of the newspaper, the North Star, that Frederick Douglass, a freedom fighter and abolitionist and orator, started during his time in post Civil War in Reconstruction. And so we really just want to make sure that we were really pulling on that inspiration of the North Star being a beacon to guide people, as well as a place of knowledge, and thinking about the newspaper as this place of knowledge and place of communication. So, what kind of things will you find in the North Star Project? It's an opportunity to put objects and curate objects into collections for specific learning needs. It's an opportunity to design digital activities, as well as an opportunity which is embedded in the platform itself. Which I think, if you're an educator out there, this is a great feature of this learning lab, is that you have an opportunity to embed checks for understanding, and short and sweet kind of checks for understanding that can go at different checkpoints along the way. And one of the things that we really like about the ability to use the Learning Lab platform for this project is that we can also share collections among educators, students, and families. And so, as you all are utilizing the Learning Lab collections and our North Star collections, we hope that you may be able to find ways to use them to communicate, share with your students, and to share with your families more of the African American story. Let's go to our next slide. In the North Star Project, there are 3 series of Learning Lab collections that you'll find. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the one that's on the left-hand side. It's called the Learning History Through Objects series. And these activities in this series follow a chronological order through history, and they highlight key stories, themes, and objects that are in our permanent exhibitions here at the museum. The one in the middle, called Becoming a Historian, in this series of activities, it supports skill growth among 6 historical thinking skills, such as contextualization, compare and contrast, reading the silences, and other such skills. And then the series that's to the right side, called Read Between the Brushstrokes, is one of our it's a unique series, and we're really proud of this series as well, because our museum is really fortunate to be a history museum with an intentionally curated fine arts collection to deepen the telling of the African American experience. And so this series of Learning Lab activities focuses on selections from our art collection and uses close looking exercises as well as critical thinking questions to set the artwork in context. And so, Philippa, if we could take a little bit of a deeper look into one of our collections, and I can highlight some features that we have. So these will be features that you'll see in a typical Learning Lab collection from our museum. We design our collections, they're designed to function like a toolbox for educators or like a discovery kit for students. So there's so many ways that you can engage with a given collection. You could start at the beginning, so at that title tile, and progress tile by tile, or you could choose a section to explore. Or you could even focus on one specific object tile to dig deeper into one artifact or resource. Our North Star Learning Lab collections seek to use a combination of objects from our museum's holdings, connected video resources, and other types of supporting primary sources to help teach and learn about the topic or a topic in African American history. So, Philippa, would you navigate to the info section at the top of the page? Thanks. In the info section here, you're going to find an overview of what the collection is about, as well as a connection to standards for those educators who want to make connections to their local and state curriculum. And Philippa, if you navigate to line 1, to that last tile on line 1, yes, you'll find in many of our collections, we'll have a main question that will help to kind of kickstart the collection at the experience of the collection that you'll have. So if we'll go back to the collection and then navigate to line 2. So we've included what we call chapter headings to section the collection into bite-sized pieces. So for example, if you look on line 2 at tiles 1 and tile 5, that's an example of a chapter heading. Philippa, if we continue down.
Okay. Do you want me to click on those or no?
No, you don't need to click on those. I
Okay.
don't think. Yeah, I just wanted to show an example of what we
Here.
call the chapter
Okay.
headings. Yeah, great. So if we navigate down to line 7,
Have to count.
I can
Um,
probably point
Here.
out we're on line 7 and then go over to tile 4. So if you click on this one, we really look to seek to add thought-provoking questions as well as resource investigating questions to the selected sources. So if you look to the left side of your screen, you'll see a list of questions that we've included to help students as they're listening to this video, to help them think about the information that they can glean from this video that also helps them answer that larger main question. So if we go back out to the larger collection there.
Okay, and just so people see, I'm doing that by clicking on that box there at the bottom. Okay.
All right, and if we go to the last line of tiles, included in many of the collections will be a closing question and ideas for further exploration. And so for this collection here, you can see examples of that in tile 2 and 3. So if you click on, yeah, there you go, on tile, that's the final question. So it kind of brings you from the main question through to a final question. And then if you go to the next slide or the next tile there, yep, then you can see a couple of expansion activities that one could do to help further consider this topic. For this one is the Learning Lab collection of daily acts of resistance. And so these questions and these activities will help students dig a little bit deeper into thinking about daily acts of resistance or larger acts of resistance. So thank you, Philippa, for taking us into this live view of a collection. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time with this collection and the theme of this collection as we continue forward. And so if we could go back to our slide deck. So be a little bit of how we think about using these collection. So let's switch to the next slide, please, Philippa. And we can go forward to the next slide. Thank you. So we'll start a little bit with thinking about historical context. And this is a really important historical thinking skill that we try to embed in all of our Learning Lab collections to really help provide that basis and understanding. So historical context is the social and political and cultural, economic and environmental situations. So I'm going to say that again. Historical context is the social, political, cultural, economic, and environmental situations that existed in a certain time period. Learning about historical context helps us to understand and interpret primary sources based on the time in which they were created. And for our time together as we continue forward, as I said, we're going to use the Learning Lab collection of daily acts of resistance that we just kind of peeked into. That's going to be the one that I'm focusing on and the one that we're going to pull some of our sources from for this time. So that's going to have us kind of focused and set in the 18th, late 18th and early 19th century as we look at how slavery was resisted by people. So next slide, please. So let's start setting some of this context. So to begin our setting of our context, we're starting with the question of what is slavery for this. And slavery is a labor system in which one group of people forces another group of people to perform unpaid labor and is often accompanied by social and legal oppression. Enslavement has been a part of human history for centuries. In the United States, however, enslavement took on a new and insidious form called chattel slavery. Under chattel slavery, people were considered property, similar to household items, farm equipment, etc. As chattel slavery became the predominant form of labor in the U.S., slavery became a status, enslavement became a status that was passed down through birth, through the mother's lineage. Chattel slavery, as it developed in the United States, was also defined by race and racism, and people of African descent were enslaved in this system. not afforded the opportunities of citizen, or protected by laws against oppression and violence. They were not able to conduct their lives of their own free will and were forced to labor for the benefit of white enslavers. While there were African Americans who were born free or became free, the legacy of slavery also cast a shadow on these free Black people and how they were able to function in society. And Philip is going to be posting in just a potential classroom activity to help think about using historical context and practicing that skill by having your students create a chart of social, economic, political, and cultural and environmental aspects of any given time period. So it could be this one if you choose to use this learning lab, or in another one that you're studying. Let's move to our next slide. I think it's really important that we state it clearly that enslavement has never existed without resistance from the people who are being oppressed. In the 18th and 19th century, there were laws created and social norms that were created that kept African Americans and people who were enslaved oppressed. All across slaveholding states, there were laws that were called slave codes that restricted many aspects of an enslaved person's life, such as their ability to travel, their ability to marry, their ability to gain education, how they were able to have employment, as well as whether or not they were able to engage in religion, whether or not they were able to enjoy leisure, whether or not they were able to enjoy music, etc. To learn more about the slave codes, there's a link that's going to be coming to you all for a crash course video that I think might be helpful to expand more about the slave codes. This, again, in service of getting and understanding historical context. Enslaved people resisted these restrictions in everyday ways, such as breaking tools, leaving the farm or plantation for a day or two, maybe hiding out, or working really slowly. These acts of resistance were not designed to break the bonds of enslavement at that moment, but they were done to make life a little easier for them to be able to survive and to endure. Black people also maintained and highly valued family bonds, whether they were biological or ones that were formed. They also valued and maintained religious beliefs, and some preserved African cultural practices. And doing these things really pushed against the notion of dehumanization. It really pushed against that dehumanization that enslavement worked to make happen in order to keep these people oppressed and enslaved. Bearing witness is also another way that people pushed against the institution. So, bearing witness through testifying or having one's story told in writing was another way that people who experienced enslavement could resist. And we see that in many of the slave narratives that have come down to us. The most widely recognized form of resistance that many people will probably jump to mind when they think about resistance of enslavement is running away or self emancipation. Each form or act of resistance came with a cost and required courage in the face of possible retaliation, punishment, or even death. And it's this courage and demanding to be seen as a human being that we honor today. Let's move forward into our activity space. So, with a little bit of context and stage setting for what we're going to be doing next, we're going to move into our activity where we're going to explore a couple pieces, a couple primary sources, a couple pieces of historic evidence, so that we can begin to think about how those pieces of evidence tell us more about resisting. We use our primary sources to help us understand more about the ways that people resisted in both those big, bold ways as well as in those small, everyday ways. So we're going to use some thought questions as well as some thinking routines to help deepen our historical understanding. So let's move to our next slide. And what you see here is an excerpt on the screen, and we're going to pause for about a minute to give you time to read the excerpt on the screen. I will also read it aloud for anyone who may prefer an audio telling of this, or I know you may be like me, you may also be on the move and trying to get your professional development happening while you're on the move. So I will also read this out loud. Seized with the determination to learn to read at any cost, I hit upon many expedients to accomplish the desired end. The plea which I mainly adopted, and the one by which I was most successful, was that of using my young white playmates, with whom I met in the street, as teachers. I used to carry almost constantly a copy of Webster's spelling book in my pocket, and when sent on errands, or when playtime was allowed me, I would step with my young friends aside and take a lesson in spelling. I generally paid my tuition fee to the boys with bread, which I also carried in my pocket. I am strongly tempted to give the names as a slight testimonial of the gratitude and affection I bear them, but prudence forbids, for it is almost an unpardonable offense to do anything, directly or indirectly, to promote a slave's freedom in a slave state. So my question to you is, how does this excerpt demonstrate resistance? Put in the chat any phrases or words that stood out to you that might help us view this excerpt through the lens of resistance. I'll give you a moment to add some phrases and words in the chat. How does this excerpt demonstrate resistance? Phrases or words that stood out to you to help us view this through the lens of resistance. I'm seeing a few comments come across. I see that at any cost has stood out to many people. The determination to learn to read. Yes, hit upon expedients to accomplish my desired end. A couple of people have called that out. At any cost. I'm also seeing uh, Allie J points out that prudence forbids because teaching someone to read was illegal, or teaching an enslaved person to read was illegal. Rose calls out which I also carried in my pocket. I think that was also something that stood out to me in this excerpt, that the person recounting this carried a copy almost constantly of a spelling book in their pocket, thinking that at any moment I might have an opportunity to learn, and it's right here, ready for me. Thank you all. Continue, if you have more thoughts, please do continue to put them in the chat. I think it's important for us to understand, as a few people have commented in the chat, that the act of learning to read and the act of teaching someone who was enslaved to read was done against the backdrop of laws and social norms that prevented enslaved African Americans from learning to read. The codes also included restrictions on teaching people to read, and the prevailing thought was that Literacy would spoil, and I say that in quotes, an enslaved person and make them unfit to be a slave because they would desire freedom. And if we go to the next slide, thank you. That excerpt was an excerpt from My Bondage, My Freedom, Frederick Douglass's narrative of his life, which Allie J immediately recognized upon seeing the excerpt up on the screen there. Frederick Douglass was an African American abolitionist author and orator who had escaped from enslavement and used his life story to inform and inspire people. And perhaps one of the most famous of the slave narratives, Douglass's story really does demonstrate the deep desire for learning. In the table of contents for the 1857 edition, there are at least three descriptions of how Douglass sought literacy in his early life. And Philippa, if you would just click, you can see where those three descriptions in the table of contents pop up of where Douglass is recounting how he was first taught to read the alphabet and read letters by one of his mistresses. And then also there's conversation within these early parts of where Frederick Douglass's uh, enslaver says that he would be spoiled. So again, that quotes is a quote of somebody saying he would be spoiled if he had learned to read. And Douglass does say that learning to read was a turning point in his life. Gaining that literacy was a turning point in his life, the way it freed his mind and freed his thoughts and his ability to move through the world, as well as his ability to form for himself and to articulate for himself who he was and how he should be in this world. That was a turning point for him. Douglas's story is just one example of how enslaved African Americans looked to education as a method of freedom making and resistance against the oppression that's embodied in the institution of slavery. As I mentioned before, resistance to enslavement took many forms, some of which were pushes against small, persistent daily indignities, and others were bold, brazen risks that people took to declare their humanity. So, we're going to continue our primary source exploration together with another primary source. So, Philippa, if you would take us to the next slide. We're going to do a slimmed down version of a Project Zero thinking routine called Looking 10 times 2. But we're going to do a slimmed down version. You're going to be able to see the full version of this. Philippa's going to be putting a link in the chat for you. But right now, what I want you all to do is for the next 45 seconds, I want you to look at this painting and note 5 words or phrases that come to mind. You can use the chat feature or you can make notes for yourself. So, what are 5 words or phrases that come to mind? And to keep us honest, I'm going to pull up my clock and do 45 seconds. About 10 more seconds. 5 words or phrases. All right. So let me see what's coming up in the chat so far. I see dogging, terror, violence, survival, freedom, defense, defend yourself, survival, Please continue to share in the chat as you have 5 words or phrases that come to mind. If you're noted them down yourself, hold on to those. We're now going to add to this process here. Oh, I'm seeing fight has come through and protect. So we're going to go deeper and we're going to do a second look. And here's the times two part. And we're going to do a second look. So for another 45 seconds, you're going to look at this painting and you're going to note another 5 words or phrases that come to your mind. I'm going to start the clock now. Take an opportunity and look deeply in the background, around the edges of the artwork. Let your eyes land on part of the painting that you didn't focus on the first time. Maybe, Philippa, could we move the banner with the question for just a second so people can see the bottom edge? There we go. So people can see the bottom edge of the painting as well. So look deeply in the background, any edges of the artwork. If you focused on the foreground the first time, look deeper into the background, vice versa. What are things that you notice? Words or phrases that come to mind. They can be literal, of what you see. They can be what you see. They can be what you may think you're looking at, what you're wondering about. So let me take a look in the chat. Yeah, I'm still okay. Great. Let us drop some things in the chat if you have 5 more words that have come to mind or phrases that have come to mind. I'm seeing from Edward, I'm seeing a raised axe, a black couple, 3 dogs, one of which is dead, tall grass, a fight to the death. I see hiding, field, spirit, and death. Philippa, are you seeing anything in the chat that's standing out to you? What's speaking to you of some of the words that people are putting in the chat?
No, sorry, I was answering myself thinking, can I answer? I just see I keep seeing the sharpness of the axe and the dog's teeth versus what they're wearing. So like
Mm,
vulnerability and just the contrast of the sharpness against their skin.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It kind of speaks
But
to a comment that Kiara has put in,
mhm.
strength being there, courage. And I do think there is a sharpness. I think the teeth of the dog stand out as well to me. When I look at this painting as well, they kind of draw you along with the axe. It's like those are sort of the implements that could hurt, right? But then you do see. I always notice in this painting something that I notice is the woman's dress, the skirt, the figure that appears to be a woman, the skirt maybe, or the over the wrap. It's around her lower half. It seems to be striped, but that stripe also kind of connects visually along the log. There's something else that makes me question, is that a rope? Is it a snake? But those stripes kind of lead me there visually to see that as well. Yes, I'm seeing protection, animal, spirit, earth, and spill from Rose. Hmm. Let's, Philippa, if we could pop to our next slide. So the artwork that we've just looked at and that we are continuing to see on our screen is called The Hunted Slaves. It's painted in 1862 and was used as a piece of visual evidence in the abolitionist campaign against slavery. So we're going to continue on with this particular artwork, and we're going to bring in another modified Project Zero thinking routine to help us continue to probe this particular source and develop some empathy. And we're going to use the thinking routine called Step In, Step Out, Step Back. And you'll be getting a link to also um, be able to read the full routine of that as well. So I would like to ask you all to choose one of the humans in the painting. And There's no rhyme or reason, just to choose one of the humans that are in the painting. And we're going to first step in to their perspective. So, what do you think this person may be feeling, thinking, or experiencing? And add some thoughts into the chat. What do you think, whomever you chose, whichever individual you chose, what do you think they may be feeling, thinking, or experiencing? Just give you a moment to think that through. While you all are thinking about that, I just want to call it another comment that I see in the chat that I think is really it's really artistic and poignant. Someone noticed the red in the sky and wondering, is the red in the sky that you can kind of see in the background a little bit, does it reference dawn? Is it fire or the beginning of a journey? Thanks for sharing that artistic question. Yes, I'm seeing some things come through here. Someone chose the human figure in the painting that appears to be a man that's standing there and with a surge of adrenaline. So that's the figure with the axe. That I think we're referencing there. The surge of adrenaline. Alice calls out that terror might be the feeling that's happening in here. Alice also puts in determination. Dog Diva is saying that the female figure appears to feel desperate. Um, the man with the axe is determination to be free. Right. Yeah, I think that these are all good thoughts and comments to what we may be feeling here. I think you all are referencing and picking up, connecting with those 5 words that you all were seeing earlier as we were first looking and taking a look at this painting of what's there. I also, one of the things that I notice and see, in a comment, I've looked at this painting with a group of educators just this summer, and one person pointed out that the woman in that position, sort of being protected, the female figure in looking protected, is not looking is they felt that this person did not have a look of feeling scared, but more of feeling like protected. And we had a conversation about just how, we are coming to an image and looking and making interpretations about feelings, and how for one person maybe a gesture may suggest one thing, but it may suggest something else to someone else. When we thought about does this how does the interpretation change the meaning of this painting? What does it say about perhaps their relationship with each other, or the determination, or what's um, kind of how their communication may be happening in this piece. So just wanted to share that, and how this resource, or this, I'm sorry, routine can elicit and go into further conversations about the interpretation of this painting and what we're learning from this painting. So let's take a moment and let's step out. And the question to you at this moment, as we're stepping out now, is what would you like or need to learn to understand this person's perspective better? So again, sharing into the chat. When we are doing the step out part of this routine, what do you feel like you would need to learn to understand this person's perspective better? So again, we're going to continue to stay focused on the 2 human figures that are in the painting. What might you need to understand their perspective better? Someone is noticing that the male figure in the painting still has a chain, but that the woman does not seem to be chained. So there's some evidence of physical evidence of being bound on the man, but not necessarily on the woman. And someone says that their fight tells me everything I need to know. I think for me, when I think about stepping out and thinking about what I would like or need to know, to understand this person's perspective better, is to, for me, is getting a stronger understanding of what the experience of enslavement was like. And so for that, it's continuing to read slave narratives, read ones that were done in the 1800 in the 1800s, 1900s, as well as ones that were done later on, um, through the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, in the 1930s, 1940s. So those are places where I would want to, that I think where I would feel to need to learn better to understand this person's perspective. Yeah, and Kiara says that we'd like to know them both, know their story. And the Judiciary History Center says it's visceral. There's something very visceral feeling about this image. And Dog Davis says, I'm interested in knowing about the dogs. Are they dogs that they know from where they're escaping from, or is this an additional betrayal? And the dogs in this painting, if you were to use this with a group of students, the dogs in the painting are often a point of conversation. And I think that it's an opportunity to talk about the different ways in which enslaved people were oppressed, different tactics that were used to keep them from leaving, to keep them from escaping, to bring them back. Um, I think there are also ways to talk about what the dogs represent in the way in which they're being presented in this space. So yeah, there would be more interested, I think, in knowing about the dogs, and I think that is a valid point to want to know more about the role of dogs in particularly in this time period and vis-a-vis how they may have been used against enslaved people to better understand. And I think when you see this and think about this as being a visual piece of campaign of an abolitionist campaign against slavery, the visceral nature of the aggression that you see in the dogs and the determination that you see in the male figure, this is all part of that story of that abolitionist campaign of they're trying to show the depths of how bad enslavement was, how violent, how serious, how life and death enslavement was at this moment. Thank you. I appreciate your compliment. So let's do the last part of this routine and let's step back. And so I want you to have a moment of personal reflection. What do you notice about your own perspective during this exercise? Happy if anybody wants to share into the chat, but I really want this to be something where you personally have a moment of self reflection. What do you notice about your own perspective during this exercise? And feel free if you want to share into the chat. We'd be happy to have you do so. But again, this will be an opportunity for personal reflection. What do you notice about your own perspective during this exercise? I'll share a little bit from my own reflection and my perspective during this exercise is that no matter how many times I look at this painting, I'm going to use the word visceral again that was brought up earlier. The visceral and emotional nature of this painting strikes me each and every time. And it reminds me that the depths of what this experience was are still spaces that it's difficult for me to know the emotionality of it. It's difficult for me to feel that viscerally, but this painting gives me a sense, and recognizing that my perspective of where I sit here at this moment in this modern day and time, that this is a representation of an experience that people had to go through, that people knew about, that people were aware of. And so that's it's a personal reflection, and I share that with you. Um, to say that it's something that I keep in mind so that when I come to reading and understanding and thinking about the experience of enslavement and reading people's words about what they went through, I bring that recognition of my perspective to that space so that I can open my mind and my heart to listen and understand and learn more. So, thank you. Thank you all for going on this part of this primary source exercise and journey with me. We're going to move to our next slide. And I'd like you all to take a moment and read the quote that's on the screen. Have an opportunity, just take some time to think about what this quote is saying. And I want you to think about for yourself, what are thoughts that come up for you when you read this? I chose a quote that was a bit more modern than the subject of our theme today, very intentionally, because this is an opportunity where I want you all to think about how you will then step back into the world through the lens that we've been discussing. What thoughts come up for you all when you read this quote? Share with us in the chat if you would, please. Oh, thank you, Kiara. I appreciate that. Kiara says, "This is what I want my students to walk out of my class believing for themselves." Yeah, that's profound. And it is it is knowing that you all are in the classrooms with these students, helping to foster their beliefs that they are historical actors, that they can affect change, that they will affect change, they will create change, they will be change. Thank you, Dr. Vinland, for your compliment. Yes, Dog Diva says, "Be the change even when you are met with resistance. Push on." Thank you, Rose. I greatly appreciate everyone's engaging input in this session. And I hope that you all will take some opportunity to explore more of the resources that we have on the North Star. We are looking to add more content to our project, more areas of African American history, more stories, more connections, all to help and support in the teaching and learning of African American history and American history writ large. So thanks, Philippa. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Kendra. So at this time, let's see, it is just about the top of the hour, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I also want to add the link to the collection that accompanies today's session. So I'll give you just a minute in case anyone has anything to add or question to ask us. This was such a powerful session today, Kendra. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you for being on the journey with me.
Okay, so I think I'll just show you. So thank you for coming. Thank you all for your comments. It looks like we don't have any questions coming in. So I'd just like to point out we have 2 more sessions planned for the fall. One is on November 14th. It's Earth Optimism, Youth Action and Leadership with an educator from Smithsonian Affiliations. And then on December 12th, Using Universal Design for Learning and Digital Women's History Resources for Accessible Learning. And we'll look specifically at Emma Tenayuka. So all of those, you can find those on the Learning Lab help page. And thank you all so much for coming. And thank you so much to Kendra for being with us today.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.